Hi, everyone. Thank you all so much for joining us this afternoon for our special Hulu Comedy Day at the USC Comedy Festival. I'm Alex Ago, Director of Programming here at the School of Cinematic Arts. Before we get started, I'd like to thank our USC Comedy faculty and staff, as well as USC Visions and Voices, the Arts and Humanities initiative that generously sponsored the festival. I'd really like to thank Hulu and particularly Lauren Burnett for being amazing festival partners and for bringing us such a wide array of Hulu original comedy, from Rami and Shrill to Solar Opposites, Crossing Swords and Marvel's MODOK to Woke. Our spotlight on Hulu's Woke features co-creators Keith Knight and Marshall Todd, and executive producer and director MAURICE Marable, and will be moderated by Desa Philadelphia, our SCA Communications and Development writer. Before we start the panel, we're also going to screen the season 1 finale of Woke called Blue Lives Matter. It runs about 27 minutes. If you'd like to ask a question during the panel, please just type it up in the Q&A box at the bottom of your Zoom screen. And I hope that you enjoy the show. And please now welcome Professor David Isaacs, Chair of the John Wells Division of Writing for Screen and Television and co-chair of USC Comedy.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Alex, and hello, everyone. On behalf of my co-directors of USC Comedy, Professors Barnett Kelman and Jack Epps, I want to welcome you again to the USC Comedy Festival, brought to you through Visions and Voices. And today, a look into the Hulu series Woke. This is our 5th edition of the festival, our first fully online. And it's given us the opportunity to extend our reach and add to some events and guests that would be hard to bring you under normal circumstances. So sometimes these kind of troubling things have silver linings. A big shout out to our festival producer, Alex Ago. Without Alex, I can tell you this would be a much more thin festival. Brian DeAngelis, who is coordinating and running our Discord server, where you can discuss this upcoming event and the festival with SCA students, alums, and friends. The link will be in the chat. And as always, a special thanks to our dean and great supporter of USA Comedy, Elizabeth Daly. Just a word about USC Comedy. If you're interested in writing, directing, or producing comedic content, or you're a fan or an enthusiast of the form, USC Comedy offers an array of curriculum through the School of Cinematic Arts in our different divisions designed to help you discover, develop, or enhance your comic voice. So please check us out on the USC Comedy website. We get a list of all the courses. Special thanks as well on behalf of Barnett and Jack and I to our friends at Hulu, who have provided us today with an array of the talented artists who are bringing a particular brand of thought-provoking and funny series to streaming. So for the next hour and a half, we'll learn a little bit more about the series Woke. After that, you'll meet our moderator, Desa Philadelphia, journalist, activist, and a key member of the School of Cinematic Arts Office of Communications, and someone I dearly miss seeing every day on the 3rd floor of the SCA building. So please enjoy the final episode of the 1st season. And as soon as that's over, you'll meet Desa, and she will introduce you to our panel. Enjoy.
It's possible to speak with you all. I am Desa Philadelphia. I am the head writer and editor at the USC School of Cinematic Arts. And I'm not going to read your full bios because, like I said, I want to have as much time as possible for the questions. But I'll just say for the audience that joining us are Keith Knight and Marshall Todd, the co-creators of Woke, and MAURICE Marable, the executive producer. Is it Maurice or Morris?
It's Mo, but
okay, Mo.
Everybody calls me Mo, but my mother named me Maurice.
Okay, well, I do not want to offend mom, so I'm asking to get it right. Okay, Mo. And to briefly say that Keith is the creator of this world as the award-winning cartoonist of Nightlife Chronicles that ran for more than a decade in national newspapers. Marshall is a screenwriter, sought-after script doctor with credits that you will recognize, and also Mo is the executive producer and is also a director and writer. So thank you all for being here. And I just realized while watching the show again, so I'm gonna say it's not deliberate that I have the same hairstyle as Shears Mata, who plays Diana. That was a coincidence.
Right.
So to get right to it, when the show first came out, I loved it, and I'll tell you what I loved about it, because I want you to talk about how you create a show about wokeness that really puts wokeness in the real context of how it's experienced, especially by Black people who, you know, have this challenge of wanting to be and sometimes needing to be woke in our lives, but also not being perfect at it, and two, sometimes we don't want to have to deal with it. We just, you know, we want to just, you know, like kick back and have a beer and smoke a joint and do whatever else we want to do without it having to mean something. So let us in on some of the conversations around creating around that theme of wokeness.
Wow.
Who wants to go first? Keith?
That's a lot. You know, there was so much that we talked about, but one of the things we had in common was both Marshall and I were profiled by the police, and sort of the experience of what that did to us, and sort of that reminder of no matter what you're doing or where you're at, like your number can be called. And that's sort of one of the big things that happens to you. But we also shared a lot in common with all the sort of microaggressions that you go through. And here you are just trying to live your life, and there's a reminder of all the stuff that you have to go through. And sort of the big thing was sort of the decision of like, do you want to live in that all the time, or do you want to create art that takes you away from that and makes you forget about it for a moment? And so, you know, we talked a lot about that stuff.
Yeah. I think Black people can't help but be woke because we're Black. So part of the thing we wanted to do is sort of talk about woke in a sense that not so earnest, but sort of get inside of it and talk about what it means to Black people, how Black people navigate being woke. And also, Black people tend to normalize their pain. So a lot of times we have to laugh at things for us to survive. So we wanted to sort of show that in the show, that it's a comedy because that's exactly how Black people process their pain, process wokeness. So we wanted to sort of mirror that in our show.
That's very true. And so when you started having the conversations, and Mo, if you want to weigh in here about, you know, how to construct the show, that's, you know, yeah, there are other characters for comic relief or for context, but really through the lens of Keith. And so a Black man who is having to deal with these issues in a comedic way. You know, this is a comedy festival. You're here because the show is funny. How do you talk about making all that stuff funny?
Well, you know, that's, how do you make it all funny? We used to have a phrase last season about what we were talking about. And, you know, it's funny, but it's not a joke.
Yeah.
You know,
that's good. Yeah.
You know, the idea of how, like Marshall said, how do we talk about our pain? How do we deal with our pain? How do we deal with our insecurities as Black people? And historically ribbing, making jokes, making fun of others, making fun of ourselves. You know, we will take the piss out of ourselves. You know, we always turn the other cheek. We don't really, we kind of normalize our situation. And I just think, like, in this show, you know, it's actually not just Black. Let me put it this way. Keith is one particular Black person with one history for himself and one thing that he grew up with. Every Black person takes this stuff very differently. Now we're just looking at somebody who is an artist, right? Who, if folks have seen the first episode, he has stayed away from the pain of racism in his career, right?
Deliberately,
Yeah, why can't I just have fun? Like, and that's a thing for all Black artists. Why can't we just sometimes have fun? Why do I have to be political? Why do I have to stand up and say something? You know, I just want to have some fun in my life. And that's true. I mean, you should be allowed to. So for us in this show, we wanted to take that kind of thought process. And then what happens when it happens to him? And then how does he turn his life to become what I would say an accidental activist? Because he didn't start off trying to be an activist. It kind of came to him in this thing. But we were really dealing with trauma. We were really dealing with how Black men deal with trauma. And how they deal with it is that they don't talk about it. They just move forward. They try to get their jobs. They try to make their money. They try to, like, anything but deal with that. Yeah. And so that, I think, is, and truth for me is what comedy is all about. So if you can get into the truth and people can relate to the truth, and then it's going to be funny.
Yeah, well, you know, it's like at USC, we like to get into, you know, how the sauce is made. So when you're in the room and you're writing having to match these situations with the jokes, what's the process? What's the approach you take in terms of having to deal with the trauma, but then, you know, having to write the jokes?
Well, I'm just going to start off by saying I'm lucky because I don't have to write the jokes. I just have to make sure that they're funny when we shoot them. But these two, Marshall and Keith, crazy. They just, you know, Keith looks at everything from the ironic side of it, from the, how can I say, Keith? I mean, like, you know, he's always like, you know, I don't know, Keith, Keith and Marshall, y'all are crazy. So
yeah, tell us, take us into the room with you.
First of all, I want to take USC Comedy Fest to task by showing the least funny episode of the show.
Yeah,
like, it is so out of context that anybody who's just looking at this episode, you give everything away. And like, where those puppets come from? You know, it's really funny.
I think a lot of people have seen the show.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
But
the reason why we're happy to have you here is because this show is legitimately well liked.
Oh, good. Yeah. Sorry. It's what I have a certain sensibility that I've been drawing comics for almost 30 years now. So, you know, I have a large amount of intellectual property that sort of, you could see what my sense of humor is. And it really is taking serious issues and sort of finding the humor in it, and without, not belittling it, but finding the irony and the humor in it. And I just think that being paired up with Marshall has a very different sensibility, and I think he provides humor that I don't have, and it's just it's a great combination. You know, a lot of the really interesting stuff that, say, the liquor bottles say and stuff are, you know, pure Marshall. Clovis is pure Marshall. So it's a really fun combination. But I don't want to give Mo short shrift in saying that it was Mo who decided that we use 3D puppetry and stuff for a lot of the surreal moments, and that, I think, put the show on a level that we had not anticipated. It's really amazing.
For sure.
Yeah, that's also, very striking about the show is, of course, the quality of the animation in addition to the production values and the joke and all that. It's really here at the cinema school, we've got different divisions that, writing and production and animation and something I really liked about that show, because we're always talking about students collaborating across the divisions, is that this is a real example of what happens when you do that.
Yeah.
So Mo, apparently your idea, why was it so, and also because it's such a great nod to Keith's 30-plus-year career and all that that he's done and accomplished there. So,
Well, one or two animation, 2D animation is nice, right? We all like it, but I was looking at shows like The Son of Zorn and Roger Rabbit, and those were great when they first came out. But I also felt that you were always out of the world. Like the moment 2D shows up, it's like, oh, it's a different world. It's all, somewhere else. And it just wanted the fact that things come to life in real life, like that the trash can was a real trash can talking to him. Now, it may have animated eyes, but that's the surrealness of it all, that he really sees this and it's really anchored to our world. It's not anchored to just his imagination, because what the trash can is saying, or some of the other throughout the series are saying, it's very relevant. It is very, they're making commentary on what is happening today. So I didn't want it to feel like it was something that you can dismiss. You can have fun with it. It could be funny. It can look funny. Like the beers, we wanted real beer bottles. Like I didn't want cartoon beer bottles and then you can kind of dismiss it. But these are real things that you can hold, you can talk to, you can, and I just thought that was fresher. And we worked with a company called Stupid Buddy, who does a lot of the robot chicken stuff. We worked with them. And they helped us design things, put things together.
That's what I love about animation companies. They always have great names.
Yeah. But it was just more about having more of an impact and having more people pay attention to what is being said. And it was just fun.
I remember when Mo suggested puppets the first time, I felt stupid. We were thinking about animation, 2D animation. We're so deep into it. Mo was like, what about puppets? I remember going, oh, okay, that works. That works better. Yeah. So it just made sense. And it gave the pilot and the show in general a texture we wouldn't have gotten with 2D for sure.
How does the puppetry and animation, all that, how does it affect, and I don't mean that word, it's, in a bad way, your production process? Like, what's the, give us a little bit of insight in, how an episode comes together when you've got all those different elements to think about.
Well, I mean, the thing about working with puppetry, you have to design these characters. And like the trash can, for example, there was somebody inside that trash can, operating that trash can, right? There's a team operating those beer bottles for us in camera. Okay. And so the amount of prep work, so the scripts, the ideas, the concepts all have to be done way ahead of time in order to get Stupid Buddy to look at it, pitch us designs for Keith Knight, because it is his animation. So no matter what, at the end of the day, it has to look like Keith Knight cartoons or, characters. And then Keith has to draw them out and they have to go back and forth. And then we decide on what the right design is. And then they have to go and make it physically. They have to go mold that trash can. They have to mold those beer bottles. They have to go make those things. And then, so it adds a lengthy amount of time to the process. And it's about it's about knowing what you're doing ahead of time, up front. You can't come in late and go, oh, I have an idea, let's do this next week. It's not gonna happen.
And so again, so does that mean that the scripts have to be really locked? The
animation characters have to be locked, let me put it that way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just want to say quickly to the audience, if you've got questions, please put them into the Q&A feature because we will get to your questions soon. But Keith, let me start with you on this next question because when you watched the series, if you make a list of all the issues that you're touching on, sometimes just lightly, but in such a, I mean, just nail it way. And the example I'm thinking of is with the Ayana character, because you think that she's going to have a romantic relationship with Keith. And then when he finally like goes to Vegas, she's like, dude, I'm a lesbian, it's like, bam. And then all the backstories that, as people, it brings up for us in terms of, like the ideas we have about, the misconceptions about people and who they have to be and all that stuff. So it's a lot of stuff in there, but, dealt with so lightly and so not lightly, but niftily. It's very, how, is that something that just comes naturally where you're bam, 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 like all these issues coming up? Or are you planning, like, I'm going to try to work this in, this in, this in?
Well, I think one of the things we wanted to do is sort of subvert a lot of expectations of things. So so it was important for us to not have the viewer understand exactly what's going to go on. Oh, this is going to be a love triangle, this and this and this. And it was also important as a show that's based in the Bay Area that there has to be, it would be a disservice not to have an LGBTQ character. So this was the opportunity to create that. And we really, we wanted the Clovis character and the Ayana character to sort of, come together towards the end, and that's really one of the special relationships in the show that
it's so funny when they do.
Yeah, that we're going to explore in season 2. So
yeah,
it's just fun to subvert expectations.
Yeah. Also, I think the goal in the writers' room was not to try and say something. That there are a lot of smart, politically astute people in the writers' room. We just do our show, do our thing. It's gonna already say something. That when you push it and try to say something and try to be important, I think you screw yourself a bit, because then you're on the hook for something you might not be able to deliver. So the show was about Keith's journey, Keith's awakening, and what he went through. And if we, by accident, keyed into things that were going on in society, so be it. It's a good thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, especially on a show that is titled Woke. Like, we wouldn't have called it Woke if we weren't going to take the piss out of it. Like,
yes.
If it was going to be an earnest, serious show,
You might watch it. Yeah.
It would,
call it Woke.
Yeah, and we already know now, like, that people are still discovering the show now because they dismissed it because it was called Woke.
Yeah.
But people are, it's by word of mouth. People are saying, "Oh no, you should check it out. It's actually funny," which is very interesting to see. It's like a slow burner.
How do you know that people dismiss the show because it's called Woke?
Because I'm very good at following people's reactions and stuff. When people,
we want to hear about some of those Hulu analytics.
Yeah, well, seriously, like there'll be people going, "Hey, like I've seen it in reviews, I've seen it in people posting online saying, oh, like why didn't anybody tell me that Woke was funny?" Like stuff like that, and it's just we get it. We actually, there was a whole internal debate on whether to call the show Woke, and we had all these different names, but Woke was the only one that was short and that was just, I don't know, we had all these different names, but none of them worked as well, so we just decided to go with this.
For me, and I was told not to do this, but when the show was released, I spent a good 4 days in the comment section of YouTube, every place our show was reviewed. I just spent time in the comment section to find out what people thought of the show. And
Because he wanted to troll them. He wanted to troll those people. Let me explain that.
Yeah.
I resisted trolling other people about our show because I'm an artist and I'm sensitive about my shit, right? But I resisted the idea to troll them. But you learn a lot. Some of it's nonsense. But the whole thing about the title of woke, people thought one thing, went into the show and was like, oh, that's not what I thought at all. So they were pleasantly surprised, the ones who actually put the time in to watch our show. Then there were people who just saw woke attributed to some kind of agenda that it's programming the masses to be woke, and they just bypassed it. But you know what? That's not our audience anyway. So
yeah, I do think you get the joke fairly quickly about it being called woke, because Keith starts off clearly not woke.
Yeah.
So but as we said, one of our professors put in the chat, and this is a really good question, JD Connor, who teaches cinema and media studies, is an amazing cinema historian, wants to ask about music supervision in the show, because he says it's terrific. Can you talk about any unique wrinkles into the process on this particular show? Was there anything you wanted and couldn't get?
Well, I don't know about that, but I'm gonna let Marshall is a music head. Keith is a music head. Marshall is a music head. They're music heads. And I will say the hardest part about a season 1 show like this is finding your sound.
Yeah.
Finding your sound. That is not easy, right? Music is a creative force within itself. And so, and Keith has a very particular aesthetic, and Marshall has a particular aesthetic. And I think we really decided on our characters each having a sound.
Yeah.
Like what is Clovis's sound? What is Keith's sound? And then there was the score underneath it. But but you all should shout out the music supervisor. Talk about your experience with her.
The supervisor was awesome, and I can't think of her name right now. I'm drawing a blank. But
Radio.
What's her name?
Was it Radio? Is the name of it?
Yeah. Issa Rae's company, Radio, did the series, but it was Morgan. What was Morgan's?
Rhodes. Morgan Rhodes did the pilot.
Morgan Rhodes did the pilot.
Yeah.
And yeah, like we're both music heads, Marshall and I. And what was important for us was to cover the diaspora of Black music. And so like, it wasn't just going to be hip hop. It was not just going to be, it was going to be punk music. It was going to be rock music. It was going to be R&B. It was going to be all over the place. And even when we used traditionally, like songs made famous by white artists, we looked for the cover version by a Black group. So I Fought the Law and the Law Won was done by a reggae group. Was it the Jolly Boys that did that? Yeah, and then the Intruders did Rainy Days and Mondays by the Carpenters. And so that was important for us. I'm sorry, the sun is getting right into my face right now. But it was important for us to highlight just all this music and also, budget, budget always affects it too. So it was important for us. There were a couple of times where I was like, if I've heard of the song, I don't want it. because I'm old and not cool. So if I had heard it, then it didn't work, but there were obvious ones that we wanted that were like, okay, we want the beginning of Public Enemy for the throw of the trash can. Yeah. We want A Lovely Day, Bill Withers, when right before Keith gets the cop incident happens. So there's certain things that we made sure that we shelled out for.
By the way, her name is Stephanie Diaz Matos. She was the music from Radio.
Yeah,
the series.
And I will say that my band, the Marginal Prophets, from San Francisco, is in the soundtrack too. So that makes me happy.
Awesome. God, you do a lot. Okay, we've got a question actually from someone who's from the Bay Area, Brian DeAngelis. He's an MFA working in developing a voice in writing and producing for comedy. And he says, we get a lot of notes from professors about not being too political, so as not to alienate any potential markets, but also making sure to be vocal about the issues we're passionate about. So, it's kind of a little contradictory there. Here's this question. How do you find that balance between being woke, but not driving away the people you want to watch the show?
Well, look, we're not trying to be woke.
Yeah.
We're trying to be honest. We're trying to poke at things that are really happening out there, right? And how real people, not pundits, not anybody else, how they see it, but how Keith Knight, his character, sees it. And I think when you talk about, again, police brutality, mental health issues, you talk about all these things, if you're not trying to be preachy and stand on a soapbox, and you're trying to just really deal with it, and then it works.
Yeah.
And the funny comes out of it being awkward to be in all these situations, right? The funny comes in with not knowing how to deal with that stuff. So yeah, we weren't ever trying to be woke. We were trying to show the hypocrisy of what people think woke is.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Also, I think, look, man, if you're a writer, creative in any sort of capacity, what's important is your uniquely biased take on the world. You have a point of view, you have a voice, and if some people don't get it, so be it. It's not your concern to be concerned with people outside your sphere of concern. If that makes sense.
That makes a lot of sense.
Why do you have to be woke to understand that police brutality is wrong?
Yeah, you don't. Exactly. Yeah. Okay. And audience members, you can put questions in the chat too, but I encourage you to use the Q&A feature. So let's go to that. Ayanna Ziegler asks, when talking about race in comedy, where do you draw the line between what is appropriate for a joke and what's not? Or is there a line? And she thanks you all for being here.
There is no arbitrary line that we all agree on. Everybody's, I'm sure some people have seen our show and it's like, it's too much. It's over the line. And other people are saying you didn't go far enough. I think it's all different. I think it's similar to what Mo and Marshall said, which is like, the only thing you can do is make a show that you'd want to see.
Yeah.
And that's all we did, was to make a show that we wanted to see. And we're not so unique not to know that there are a bunch of us out there like that, like that want to see this too. And so that's all you can do. Just remember, producing the show, filming it a lot of it was a nightmare, because Mo was shooting this thing in Vancouver in February of last year, and it snowed or rained 32 straight days. And it's supposed to be California, so everybody has to take off their jackets and like pretend it's California. And there was just so many different things that were going wrong, like weather-wise, and just we were behind on scripts and doing all this different stuff. And you get so stressed out when this stuff is happening. And I just kept on saying to myself, like, it's just TV. We're just making TV. Like nobody's dying from this, it's just television. And so you just got to remember that, like, if you make a show that we like, I think that's all you can do.
Yeah.
And just to go back to the appropriate line, it's a couple of things. One, don't ever be mean just to be mean. That is not a joke. That's just nasty and rude, right? So we don't ever write jokes where we are making fun of people if we're gonna make fun of somebody, we're also gonna make fun of ourselves somewhere within that. Okay, and so that, we just don't believe in writing mean jokes for the sake of trying to hurt somebody, right? And I think in every conversation, in every POV, there are two sides to that. There are two sides, so that when the joke lands, you know, it's funny because either everybody goes, yeah, that's real, yeah, we get that
That's
shit.
funny.
You know, or it's like somebody else is going to come in with their other joke on the other side.
Yeah.
And it's going to be a joke battle based on ideas, you know, so there's, you know, conversation should never be over the line. I don't know, as long as you're being real about a conversation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Keith established this mandate in the first writer's room and this one, always punch up.
Yeah.
We're not punching down. We're not making fun of anyone. The trick was to sort of skewer people and institutions that have it coming. You know.
Yeah.
So you've got a compliment followed by a question from Marco Zapala, who says it's truly remarkable and a one-of-a-kind gift to have the ability to be so graceful and hilarious with such important subjects. In Woke's humor and writing, you've made extremely difficult subjects digestible, cathartic, and approachable. Was this intentional or a successful byproduct? Well, I think we know the answer to that, but still, anything else you want to say about it?
I can't stress enough that enough things happen to Black people where if you don't laugh at them or find a way, then you fold in on yourself.
Mm-hmm.
So going in, you want to deal with it. You want to talk about it, but it's not a drama. It's a comedy. So how do we get inside of this thing and laugh at our pain, which is something Black people have done for years,
Yeah.
centuries.
Yeah.
Because without being able to laugh, it's just, existence is just not possible.
It's a universal Black thing too. It's like, you know, anywhere you go where there's Black people, it's probably the number one coping strategy. And, you know, your parents will make fun of their kids' trauma to get you, you know, prepared for having to do that. It's true. I mean, and that's like another thing that's very apparent in the show too. It's that it's taking that tradition and centering it. Yes. So Claudia Esquivel asked, well, first she said, they say, because I don't know what Claudia's gender is. So first they say, I just want to first commend all of you for how brilliant this show is. I remember reading the pilot before it aired and being stunned when I did finally get to watch it, because it truly felt like I had already seen it. Yeah. Your screenplay managed to be so visual and specific that it painted a perfect picture in my mind's eye. What advice do you have for creating such a visual screenplay, and what is your process like?
I just wonder which screenplay you read.
Yeah, a lot of versions of the pilot. There were a lot of versions out there.
Yeah, a lot of versions. I think it helps to be a cartoonist. I work very visually, so I pictured a lot of the scenes that I wrote in my head, and you know, even the earliest version of pitching the show, I said, I just want to have a scene where my character picks up a trash can and throws it at a window and it bounces off the window. Sorry. And it literally is exactly what I pictured, what Mo did. And it makes me happy just to see that every time.
Yeah. Process. My process is constant failure. just constant failure.
That's very woke thing to say, Marshall.
Listen, you owe it to yourself to push on, especially if you're a writer, because the things you do won't really satisfy you. But at the end of that thing you go through is a reward. Hold on. But yeah, just push forward with whatever idea you have.
Thank you. Jay Goldstruck asks, how have your experiences within the TV industry changed since the release of the show, specifically in terms of biases and opportunities? So I think what Jay is asking, is it easier for you now?
Well, you know what? That's a double-edged sword. I mean, look, there was a movement afoot that was happening prior to woke coming out.
Yeah.
Okay, so there was a push for the last. Look, there's been a push for Black inclusion since I remember, like since I was a little kid, right? And then, you know, if people go back to television and you look at the 80s, there were more Black TV shows in the 80s than you see right now, right? And so right now we're at this place of what kind of happened over the summer of last year, 2020, you know, that there is a corporate push to make inclusion seem important, and it is. But I will still say that for the most part, when I go off to pitch a TV show somewhere, I still am not talking to a person of color who's going to greenlight that show. I'm still at a place where I have to ask somebody who's not familiar with my culture as much as they think they are to say, that's a good idea. You know, we are still in a place where other folks are deciding what is allowed for our culture to be displayed. It's still that way. Now, do I get more offers and TV shows and movie scripts and things like that? Yes, but 90% of that stuff is all based on, here's this awkward Black man who isn't woke yet, you know, so that's the 90% of the stuff that comes across my desk, you know. And prior to this, there was probably a time where people didn't know I was a Black dude. You know, I was doing Sunny in Philadelphia. I was doing Veep. I was doing all kind of other stuff, you know. I was an exec at HBO. People did not know that. So, but once you do something like this, it's like, we got Black stuff for you, man. Come on, pick this Black stuff up, brother. Come on, you got it. I know you can do it.
Do you feel empowered to say no? Because that's the other thing too. I think that might be a difference now is that we're allowed to call out people who react a certain way to our saying we don't want to do that.
Yes, I will. Yes, if it does not meet my internal moral compass, I'm saying no. But I will have a conversation with you, and I will definitely let you know why I'm saying no. And hopefully that'll educate you moving forward with other people.
Yeah. Hermione Beard asks, as Black creators, do you feel more pressure to educate versus entertain?
I just think, as Black creators, I think that it's important to entertain and maybe have a message within that. But I think if you set out to teach something, I don't know that you necessarily get the audience that you want, because that audience is really narrow. But if you entertain first and then couch whatever it is you want to say within that bit of entertainment, then I think you're on the right track. That it's sort of a Trojan horse kind of thing, right? It's sort of a low pitch. Like you do what you need to do. And then within that thing, you place the real message.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, like you can entertain, but depending on the makeup of your cast, depending on the makeup of your character, you don't have to say anything. You just have to normalize the world, right? Yeah. You just have to put your characters in situations that are real and honest to that culture. Normalize the world, and people will learn and people will get educated. I think if you set out to educate, you might as well be doing shows on PBS or the History Channel and make a documentary. I think you have to entertain people, you have to make people laugh, and you have to allow people to see themselves in the mistakes that we make on the show with our characters.
I don't think Miles Davis set out to be cool.
Just us.
He set out to be a great musician, right?
Yeah.
But the cool was a byproduct of that. I think you, as Black creators, you do what you do, and you move forward in that vision. And I think the message sort of is within that whole process. So yeah.
I'm laughing at Keith right now because he's channeling Keith. He's trying to resist the light, but he can't get away from it.
Yeah, I think I'm gonna bite the bullet and shell out for a shade for this one, because this happens in every interview that I do. So sorry about that.
Okay, no, it's great. It's just, it's uncomfortable for you, but we don't mind. Next question is from Hannah Brown. What is a piece of advice that you would give to someone just starting out who's writing and show creating? And Hannah also says, thank you all for being here, and that they can't wait for season 2.
Again, your voice.
Yeah.
What is your unique take on the world we live in? That is the most important thing. Don't read a bunch of scripts and write to what you think people want to read or see. That's a fool's errand. Do what it is you do, whatever that is. Write about it, because that's what's going to hook people, because they're going to read your stuff and be like, wow, I've never heard that before, as opposed to watching a bunch of shows on TV and be like, oh, this is what people want to see, so I'm going to write that thing. Don't do that.
I second that. Tell your story. I say that when I speak to people about cartooning. Tell your story, and again, people will respond to it if it's sincere.
Daryl Pearson wants to know what the demographics of your audience is. Do you know that? Yes, I know Keith knows it. He might not want to tell.
I don't.
It looks like he knows.
All we know is that older white women do not like the show. Older white women know that the show is good, but it's not for them. That's what the feedback was. Yeah. So I think it was the Karens of the world.
Yes.
And we also know that Black women love Blake.
Yeah. Black women love Blake Anderson.
Blake is kind of woke.
They love that character. They love him. And we look for some sort of, like, why? Because I think the idea was that because he has Keith's back, he supports him. They love Clovis too, but the oddest sort of data we got was that Black women really love Blake. We were stunned by it. So
really. Well, and the show has benefited from such a great cast. Talk about, if Keith, you want to talk about, Keith is based on you, but how much, and then, how did you go about adding those supporting characters, because each of them really does play a part in helping Keith realize, his journey.
Well, the roommates are based on characters from my daily comic strip, The Nightlife, right. And Clovis and Gunther. And when I made the transition from the weekly strip to the daily strip, I sort of drummed up the characters because I needed more to write about in a daily strip, because you're just trying to create content.
Right.
And once we went to television, it was sort of, we needed more characters to play the different roles that sort of represent certain things. So, Clovis is the yang to Keith's yin. So it's like the opposite, and they sort of balance each other. Gunther represented sort of the white person who's privileged but don't know they're privileged. Adrian was sort of the white person who is from another country and sort of observing it all from an outsider's perspective. And Ayana was sort of the woke Yoda, the Yoda to Keith's Luke Skywalker. And but it just fascinates me, the whole idea of actors who, take all this time to go all across town, an hour and a half in traffic, and then they go into this little room and read for about 5 minutes, and we have to keep a straight face while they're reading. And then it's like, okay, thank you, and then they leave. It's like, it's such a hard existence to be an actor. And but it was amazing to see the amount of people that came through to audition, and exciting to see when the people that ended up being the characters, you see them and you're like, oh yeah, of course, that's them. It's a great feeling. I'm sure Mo has much more insight than me, but it was really interesting. And the character, the Keith character in it is a very sort of basic, naive version of me, because sort of I was doing comics about police brutality long before I had an incident with the police. But it was, for the story, it made sense that it would happen at this moment. So I would say he's a little bit more naive than I am, but it was more for the audience to go on that journey.
We have another question from the audience. From Juliet Lynn. Can you talk about how you all navigated a very white space in a white institution that may not have seen the value in your voice, and how you were able to hold on to your perspective without feeling diminished to continue creating content and bring your art to life? So asking about the development process here. And Juliet continues, as a USC alum who studied business and film, I very much felt discouraged even in my early stages at a predominantly white institution.
Wow. Hulu let us do whatever we wanted to do, for the most part. For the most part.
Yeah.
I love Hulu. You know how I feel about my folks at Hulu.
Yeah.
But there are some realities that I think you should be very forward about, and not, yeah. They didn't let us do anything we wanted to do.
You're talking to people who want to do this,
I will say this, in one of Dave Chappelle's latest comedy things, the one he did outside to an audience on his farm, I think, he talked about, at a certain point in Hollywood, you go into a room where there's all these old white men in suits. We had that experience. Me, Mo, and Marshall went into this room with all these old white men in suits. And they started asking us these questions about, like, what, we don't know, what is it? And I think Mo, and I will always remember this moment, and I will always hold this moment into my grave, which is, Mo sits back and says, who exactly are we making this show for?
I remember that.
And it just shut everybody down. And I just think that, like, it is this really interesting thing where you're trying to convince, sometimes you're taking notes from folks who probably haven't ridden a public bus in decades, or just like, I just know for me, there was this moment, in the pilot where Keith is mugged by this black man at the end of the episode, and they wanted to make him scarier. And they said, it's not scary, the incident's not scary enough. And the point I wanted to make was that the police incident should be far more scary than the mugging. And I don't think white people have that feeling like, police, an interaction with police being scarier than getting mugged by a black man. So they were coming at it from a perspective that was different. And so it was important for us to make the point that it wasn't as scary, that getting mugged by somebody that looks like you.
Right.
So, but there were things like that happened.
And Marsha, I did not mean to cut you off. All I was really saying is that, first of all, Hulu's been a great ally. They really, really have.
Yeah.
But that comes over time. When you're in the development process, there's they're looking at, who's going to buy the show, who's going to look at the show, what's our audience going to be like? We were literally in a testing meeting, which was another meeting where it was just us 3 Black people and a room full of white men and 1 white woman. And they're giving us the numbers from testing, and they're all really great. But the numbers for white folks, for somebody, was not high enough. And so all they kept focusing on was like, we got to get these numbers up. We got to keep getting these numbers up. And then finally, it was the researcher who said, yo, you have a hit on your hands.
Yeah.
And there's another white guy, you have a hit on your hands. Don't worry about that white audience.
Exactly.
And so when you're dealing with, or notes that are more about white-splaining, meaning like, I don't understand that, you have to explain that to me. You need to explain that in the script. And you have to go, no, we're not going to explain that, because the audience that we're making this show for knows what that is.
Yeah.
So once you start getting to a space where you have to make a show for the other culture to educate them on your culture, you're no longer making your show.
Yeah, as Toni Morrison used to say, I'm not gonna apologize for writing books about and for Black people,
And that's the challenge. Look,
Yeah.
you're always fools, you got to school up, right? But ultimately, your goal is to not make a show strictly for the white gaze, right? That you stay true to your vision. And along the way, there are people who want you to explain certain things. And like Mo said, you have to convince them. The audience I'm making this for will understand, and they'll get it. And they'll appreciate it much more than if I tried to sort of make it easy for you.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Well, on that really great note, it's great to hear that you guys are, doing your thing and holding the line.
Yeah.
We have to wrap things up, but before we do, I just want to give you guys an opportunity to tell us all the spoilers in season 2. If that's something that you're feeling like you're not. No. Okay. All right. Well, thank you for being here. Thank you for making the show. Thank you for making it woke and dope. And we're looking forward to season 2. Thanks everyone for joining us for this conversation too.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you to USC. Thank you to everybody. Thank you for inviting us.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah. Cheers.